What is Mother 3 about? Mother 3 very explicitly continues a certain critique of modernity, much like its predecessor Earthbound. It asks a lot of good questions, but I'm not sure if the answers are good or even if there are any. Shigesato Itoi, the series creator, has been quoted as saying that he would like Mother 3 to kind of be a mirror reflecting the heart of the player, so it might be that it's more open to interpretation than what is apparent to me. It follows a very straightforward story, but one that is emotionally charged, and one that contemplates a lot of things. Following the life of a family in Tazmily village, we see how the village and the area that surrounds it, a group of small islands, changes as a foreign army slowly invades, starts experimenting with animals and nature, and implants itself in more subtle ways by seducing people through propaganda, promising happiness through comfort. A comfort that, to my understanding, is mostly brought by technology, and I think here lies one of the more obvious critiques made by the game. I was impressed by the fact that these portrayals created by a Japanese man, focusing on what I would say is mostly a certain kind of American representation, still include elements that resonate with me who is neither Japanese nor American. I really like the first third or so of the game. As expected, it starts slow, with low stakes, although one of the two most emotional moments also happens quite early and sets the stage for the rest of the game. But besides that, it really feels like a heartfelt, honest and genuine tribute to rural communities, the closely knit group of people that take care of each other. The kind of daily activities that are very observable here, and as someone who was partly raised in rural areas, it really felt like going back. You can see the kind of lifestyle where people take their kids for lunch with the grandparents, play outside and go back home in the afternoon. The kind of lifestyle where people care for each other's children and participate in their development. You can also see this in the way people collaborate, how each one specializes in different things, and everyone works together to find the missing people in the forest fires at the beginning of the game. But the game avoids romanticization and paternalism and demonization. People aren't perfect, and life is still hard. It feels genuine. It analyzes this through caricature, but it always feels that it has footing on very real dynamics. This first third or so of the game, you sometimes get a guest in your party which a couple times ends up being an older person like your father-in-law who will be yelling mid-battle for you to be careful and complaining about back pain. It feels hilariously familiar if you've ever driven your grandparents around town. As I've mentioned before, none of this is shown through some rose-tinted glasses of pastoral perfection or fantasy of an utopian rural society. People get enough to get by and are shown to be relatively happy but without extreme luxury or comfort. They need to walk to visit family on the other end of the island, but at the same time the local inn is free of charge. It's a balanced view showing a fairly unbiased representation with its pros and cons. Also, we don't get a paternalizing view of the residents either, as we can see them being human and showing their faults, like when Flint, the father of the protagonist, becomes violent out of frustration and lashes out at other residents after losing his wife. This balanced view transpires into the representation of the Magicides, magical non-binary beings that play a crucial role in the story, acting as guardians of a gigantic dragon lying dormant under the islands. There are a couple interactions where you can see other characters being slightly suspicious of them for their non-normative roles and probably their powers. But at the same time, this doesn't devolve into a cliché demonization of the communities. Magicides are seen collaborating with the main cast, and you can see that after all, everyone respects each other despite their differences. One of the Magicides ends up being one of the villains of the game, collaborating extensively with the main villain. And once again, the game kind of steps back and makes clear that they are allowed to be evil, like anyone else, and without demonizing what they are. It's not something you see often, I think. and it builds a fair foundation from which it can construct its critique of modernity, consumerism, and technology. Although these are achieved to varying degrees of success. Earthbound was known already for its satire of modern culture and the culture of consumption, our relation to material acquisition and its intertwining with how we consume art or entertainment. Around halfway through the game, we get a time skip and we see the former village is now a bigger town with a train station, bigger buildings, and that people have more widely adopted technology in their homes, like television, which they call Happy Box. As I said before, these are shown to be brought by a foreign army looking to find the 7 needles and free the sleeping dragon. It's very convincing in the way it portrays the arrival and slow takeover of the pig army, initially through friendly interactions, and selling dreams of happiness till the moment the hegemony is maintained by an aura of consensus and soft power. The train station is built to give people easier access to the mines, where some of the villagers now work. I'm not entirely sure how people were convinced to take part in it, as there wasn't any indication of unemployment problems before the big army arrived. But I like the exploration of how spaces we inhabit are designed in accordance to our work relations. The train station wasn't built for people to visit their friends and family, but out of a necessity to optimize the time people took to commute. Televisions are handed to people under the promise of a happier life if they adopt it in their households. And I want to believe this critique is more about the propaganda in media rather than the actual technological artifact, but the game makes it hard to discern which one it is. Through NPC dialogue, it seems as though the commentary is more about TV itself, as you are constantly being judged for not adopting it like everyone else. Thus, we as the group of protagonists are put in a position where we're watching everyone slowly changing their lifestyles, kinda seeing through the facade, but at the same time trying to blend in for our own sake, and an interesting observation of how the fear of missing out plays a role in our consumption patterns and the rules we adopt in modern society. On the other hand, it might be seen as a cheap critique of technology in itself rather than an introspection of who controls it and for what purposes, as you are put in the benevolent role of rejecting it and trying to make everyone else see its problems. These faults in the game's arguments also transpire to some of its ecological themes, as we watch the local fauna being tampered with by crossing animals on the island in a lab and creating chimeras out of them. Animals made out of different animal species. The motivation for this seems more like pure sadism than anything else and thus removes from the argument any possibility of it being systemic. By pinning it on madness, we omit from this logic the pursuit of growth that can corrupt our daily lives. In fact, the main motivation for Porky, the main villain of the game, is just rounded up as the pursuit of enjoyment as he is grown bored with his eternal life and cross-dimension traveling. Well, there's something to be said about how existentialism, although liberating, can break someone. At the same time, I can't help but feel these kind of motivations are more like a scapegoat for real problems. But I don't want to blame the game too much, especially when we get real working class heroes taking the center stage. At least till the story devolves into a cliché chosen one odyssey, which thankfully only happens in the final third of the game or so, with some mind-boggling lore dumps. It's just bittersweet, as I think the real subversion here would be that at the end of the story, the people of Tazmily would appropriate the train station and communication streams for the collective progress of the islands. Not that they outright reject it based on the fear of technology as embodying some kind of intrinsic evil, which is an ironic story to tell through a medium that came about so recently and that has been enabled by technological progress. Although this kind of fits into itself in a certain way with the subversion of common video game tropes. It sometimes feels cheap or too unnatural or just there because someone wanted something random to be there. But if done correctly, as it sometimes is, it allows for an interesting exploration of our expectations when experiencing the medium. I am also completely okay if someone just breaks my suspense of disbelief with something just to make it easier to get another point across. And also, I admit that it was interesting seeing the game kind of rejecting its own modernity by displaying artifacts from the previous game near the end. glorifying them in a museum-like space. I guess it's supposed to give you a foreshadowing of the final villain of the game, but I honestly think that given all I've said, even if it wasn't a conscious decision, I'm slightly suspicious about the underlying implications when we add them to all the other themes, as if the game is saying, holy shit, those were the good times, weren't they? Man, I wish I could go back to... Anyway, Mother 3 is pretty cool. It asks some good questions, and although supposedly a mirror of the player's soul, I think it is more opinionated than it cares to admit, with varying degrees of success. But it is still a sensorial treat with the amount of care put into the soundtrack, the use of color and design. One of the systems implemented into the battle gameplay is a rhythmic minigame. When you perform an attack in battle, it allows you to get extra hits from a normal attack if you keep pressing a button on time with the music. The fascinating thing is the variety of time signatures and slight variations in the battle music to give you the impression of a change of accent in it to try to throw you off when you're chaining hits. It's a real cool detail and an example of the love put into the game. I'm not sure it goes to the same crazy abstract nonsensical aesthetic of the previous game, but it has its moments, like the underwater dungeon when you need to literally cross the sea to a different island. It's mechanically interesting, if bothersome at times, but it's also very colorful and pretty, as well as the island you arrive to, which might be the most disturbing area of the game in good Earthbound style of messing with your mind by, in the midst of the visually mostly cute colorful game, making you high on wild mushrooms as you face your loved ones telling you they're disappointed in you.